Hey, folks, welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast. This being episode 397. It will officially kick it off here momentarily once we know the alerts have gone out and people are joining. So I see the YouTube one just came through. That's good.
There we go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I didn't get an alert, but I refreshed the concealed carry page and it's in the feed, but it's just not giving me an alert yet.
Yeah. That's what it is it just is not consistent with the alert going out.
Right.
So let's see who's going to be the first comment. Who is going to be is it going to be YouTube or Facebook that wins? Almost have like a competition now going between the two. And I've noticed more and more that people, Matthew Justin, he doesn't count. But Ben Gillis here, he's our first official comment on Facebook. So Facebook wins today. Larry Morgan, our first comment from YouTube. Hello, Larry. I was saying that I've noticed more and more people that used to watch pretty much all the time on Facebook. Of course, we haven't been doing the YouTube thing forever either, but I notice more and more names that I recognize showing up in the YouTube comments and not the Facebook ones. That's fine. I don't care. You know, like that's cool, folks. No matter what, though, make sure you're sharing the show. Share it with your friends. Share it with your loved ones, the people that are most near and dear to your heart. They need to hear the words we speak here. And let's see, we got a bunch more now popping in. Hey guys, Bobby and Rodney and Dean from Alabama. Yeah, but do make sure you're sharing the podcast, guys. You know, we love to see more and more new listeners and followers and viewers, and you know, we like seeing the words getting out there. I was really honored when Rich Brown, you know, told me that the work we're doing is important work. So, you know, it's kind of like a humbling moment to sort of refocus and recenter myself and go, yeah, you're right. You know, it is important work.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we can't have fun sometimes, right? But it is important work. Okay. We are going to go ahead and we're a little bit late. I had some business that come up. I kept getting interrupted with phone calls. Matthew's kind of smiling. You know, I was like, "Oh, hold on, Matthew, gotta take another call." Some critical stuff, actually related to the Concealed Carry Expo next week. Just some you know, there's a lot going on with the planning and logistics of that, and so just some things that couldn't wait. Graybeard Matt and the Great Appendix King Riley here today. I don't know if I'm the Appendix King, but I'll call myself one of the devout appendix disciples. Somebody like Spencer Keepers would have to be the king.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so let's kick off the official recorded portion of the show. Looking forward to having a good one with you guys. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 397. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I'm your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined by our producer-in-chief, master shooter extraordinaire, elite instructor, Matthew Maruster.
That's you, man, but I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm glad you're here with me as well, man. And today's going to be a great episode. Today is our news and gear reviews episode. We've got a couple of stories. So we're a little bit light on the news, but actually these are two stories that I think have a lot of tendency for a little bit more in-depth analysis. So we're going to be talking about a story, actually, an article written by my friend Jake Jackson over at tier3tactical.com called 27 Statistics That Describe How Criminals Use and Obtain Illegal Firearms. That should be a good one. That should be really interesting. It actually is based around a Bureau of Justice Statistics report that was recently released, and he breaks down the stats in that, and we'll go over that. It's pretty interesting stuff. And then, surprisingly, an article from thetrace.org, which is the site that covers gun issues, that tries to sound super reasonable in their reporting and analysis, but in reality is supported by crazy gun grabbing, guys like Michael Bloomberg. But this article's actually mostly pretty good.
Yeah.
But it asks some interesting questions, and I think it's worth discussing. So, this one's: when protesters carry guns, does it impede others' free speech? Two really interesting issues to discuss, and then Matthew and I will get into this episode. We do this once a month now, this particular episode, and so we will do our gear reviews. And I don't know what Matthew's got coming up. Well, I do, but I'm not going to say what it is yet. And I'm going to be talking about still a relatively new gun, but I've been shooting it for the last several months and really liking it. So I'll share that here in a little bit as well. Today's episode is made possible and brought to you by the Law of Self-Defense. Lawofselfdefense.com is where you can find Andrew Branca, the expert on law of self-defense. Of course, Andrew's been on the show before, and we appreciate the work he does to better educate civilian concealed carriers, or really anybody that might have or use a gun in self-defense, or really just do anything in terms of self-defense, right? Law of self-defense is not the law of gun defense, because it applies to if you had to use a knife, a bat, whatever, so. Andrew Branca and Law of Self-Defense, lawofselfdefense.com. Check him out. Give him support, and make sure you are well acquainted with the book Law of Self-Defense. It is, I think, the best book out there for teaching us the correct and proper use and understanding of law of self-defense. So check them out. And then also, CCW Safe is another sponsor of today's episode. We love the guys and the team over at CCW Safe, Mike Darter and crew, a bunch of former cops, retired cops, and others that, most of which have been involved at some point themselves in use of force, particularly use of deadly force cases. So they know a thing or two about it, and they're really passionate about making sure that all the rest of us have the resources behind us, backing us up. Matthew, that cops have access to things that civilians don't in terms of legal representation when
Absolutely.
they use deadly force, when they have a use of force incident, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's basically what that was Mike Darter's mission, and his team there was, now that we've retired or that we've left police work, we're realizing the same things we had or the resources we had as police officers, we don't have access to, like, in the public sphere. So they started CCW Safe, and of course we have the 20% discount available to Guardian Nation members. So I hope our members are taking advantage of that, and we hope that if you are considering your choice, who that should be, there's a lot of options out there, and they're not, and they're all pretty good. But I hope you'll consider CCW Safe for your self-defense coverage program. All right. They will step in and they will help you all the way through the process after you've had to legally use deadly force to defend yourself or loved ones. So check them out, ccwsafe.com. All right. Let's get to our first story, Matthew.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so 27 statistics that describe how criminals use and obtain illegal firearms. Now, Jake just published this a couple days ago, and he sent this over to me. He said, "Dude, what do you think?" And I said, yeah, "This is great. Let's get this put out there." So we shared it on our social media, and actually, I made it part of my first ever Riley Roundup email that is going to go out once a week now. So, guys, if you are on our email list, then you're missing out on that. And it's just a collection of cool stuff from me. There's going to be features from the podcast and shop talk and stuff like that I do each week. But I'm always going to feature not just an article on our site, but also an article from somebody else. Whether it's Jake Jackson or maybe something from Greg Elfritz, because he's always putting out great stuff, or even Rich Brown from American Warrior Society, Mike Steeklander, that sort of thing. If I find something that I think is really interesting and really worth a read, then that will get shared also in that Riley Roundup weekly email, that digest. So I decided for the first one, it was going to be 27 statistics that describe how criminals use and obtain illegal firearms. Matthew, I know that you looked this over. What was your first impression?
Yeah, it was really good. I think just as an overview, it's really important whenever we're talking about a topic like this that we actually have statistics to back up our anecdotal. Hey, this is what I've seen, and this is my experience, and that's what's lacking in a lot of these articles that people share on social media or memes and things like that. There's no actual statistics. You can't look at the numbers and you can't see how they came up with this. So it's really just assertions. And I think that's where people start talking at each other, and they're not using the same statistics because one person's just made them up, right? And so,
Yep.
so I think he did a great job of pulling survey data from Bureau of Justice Statistics, and really putting it into distilling it down to the essentials of how to criminals using guns, where do they get them, and because that's really a big question. It's not about what what law-abiding citizens are doing, right? It's really, we should be focusing on the criminal behavior, not guns in general, but the criminal behavior with the guns, and that's what this article really touched on.
Yep. Yeah. You're exactly right. The statistics are really important. Things that actually we can look to as numbers, as data points. That backs up exactly the positions. It's one thing just to have an opinion about what you think happens or how you think things occur. Now, this survey data, it is a survey. These statistics are based off of a survey of federal and state prisoners. It was conducted by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So that's a good thing because chances are it's done pretty well. It wasn't just thrown together by I don't know, a reporter or something. Not that that would be bad either. I've actually seen some things from journalists where they did similar things, where they went in to interview criminals and things to learn a little bit more about them. But this is an official survey done by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is a DOJ subsidiary, if you will. It's a part of the DOJ. It is a pretty long document, but it's filled with tons of good stuff. It's 20 pages. So you can get through this in a half hour or so. But I think let's just kind of start diving down into this, Matthew, and let's pull out a couple of key takeaways. And the very first thing, and it's right there in the very first line of the report, is that about 1 in 5, so 21% of all state and federal prisoners reported that they had possessed or carried a firearm when they committed the offense for which they were serving time in prison. So 21%. So again, these are state and federal prisoners. They said that they were carrying a gun at the time that they committed the crime that they are now in jail for. And then it also says that 13% of those, or excuse me, of all prisoners. So it's not 13% of that 21%. It's 13%. So it's more than half of those that were carrying a gun when they committed their offense. They used it during the commission of the crime, either by showing it, pointing it, or discharging it during that offense, that same offense. Okay. So, and then this is all just in the first paragraph. Fewer than 1 in 50, less than 2% of all prisoners had obtained a firearm from a retail source and possessed, carried, or used it during the offense for which they were in prison. Wow. Yeah. That's actually, that's remarkable. Okay, so again, we have 21%. They're in jail. They're being, surveyed as part of this study. 21% were carrying a gun when they committed their crime. 13% were used it during that crime in some fashion. And only less than 2%, it said, they actually obtained that from a retail source. So, now I don't know how in depth that goes. That could be interpreted as they didn't even have somebody go and do a straw purchase for them on their behalf, like that it came from some other source other than a retail source. So most of these guns came from a non-retail source, is how I read that.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so there's 3 statistics already. There's 27 we said, and I don't know if we're going to get through all 27. I don't know that it would be the most interesting thing to do that anyway. But uh, if you continue looking down through the data, Matthew, what are some other things that jump out at you?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it where they're getting it. Obviously, I mean, we know in the gun community that criminals aren't going to retail sources, right? But I was interested in that the when he broke down how they were obtaining it, from those other sources. Were they from burglaries, thefts, and things like that, or were they stolen? And I was surprised. On that level that I think it says here about almost 7% were found at the location of the crime. Almost a little over 4.5% were brought by somebody else. So, they committed this crime, must have been, in tandem, and one of them had a firearm and one of them didn't. But thefts only accounted for 6.4%
Mm,
of the firearm. So we keep reading statistics from police that auto burglaries where firearms are taken are skyrocketing. So if those are if that plays out true, then these other sources that they're getting from burglaries or car burglaries, if they're going up, then that means the number of firearms are drastically going up, because proportionally, it doesn't seem like criminals are that was the typical way they obtain the firearm. They typically either buy it from straw purchase, or they buy it from somebody illegally or something like that.
yep. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's take a look at some other things here. There was some data about how the guns were used. Right.
Hmm.
We touched on how some were, just used it to point. Some uh, just displayed it. Like maybe just hold up their shirt and, hey, I got a gun.
Right.
Or some actually fired it. And there's even some data about how they fired it. And so here's some information right here. All right. So, and this is among state prisoners, 27% killed, that used a gun, killed somebody with it.
Hmm.
27%. 12% injured someone, and around 54% did not fire it. So this begins to break down some data in that. So if we take those that had those that had a gun during the commission of their crime, about the biggest chunk is 54% did not fire it, right? 27% clearly fired it because they killed somebody. 12% fired it, but they injured somebody, and that leaves, I don't know, 12, 13% or something, where they fired it, okay, but they actually fired it like up in the air or something. Okay,
Right.
that's covered also somewhere here. Let's see. It actually says
7.
right here, 68% of them said they would use a firearm in the commission, or excuse me, among state prisoners, there was a 68% chance they would use a firearm in the commission of their crime, and a 46% chance they would discharge a round. So almost half, okay, among state prisoners would discharge a round as part of the commission of their crime. They've got a gun, okay. In 7.1% of cases, so I was a little bit off of my math, the weapon was discharged into the air. And then it says again in 21.5% of cases it was not discharged at all. Actually, I must be misinterpreting something, because that's a little bit different than what I was just saying a moment ago. So it just depends on where it comes from. And there's a lot to parse through, so I apologize if I got something wrong. So that's the point here. By the way, the link to both the article and to the actual Bureau of Justice Statistics, the BJS report, all going to be in the show notes of the episode. I think I failed to get the article links themselves in the description under the Facebook and YouTube headings, but I know the article link is there straight to the BJS report, so you guys can go and check that out and look into it yourself.
Yeah,
So
I think the big takeaway from those numbers is that roughly 1 in 4 criminals killed somebody. Okay,
yeah,
so 1 in 4 criminals that actually had a firearm killed somebody with it, which is is pretty sobering. I mean, if they have a firearm, you have a 25% chance that you're going to die if somebody has a firearm. Nearly half of the criminals who had a firearm on them shot somebody with it,
yeah,
either killing them or injuring them, and then so that's pretty crazy, because a lot of people, I hear a lot of people saying, well, he had a gun and you don't know if he was really going to use it or not, right? It might not have been loaded and he just had it for, to scare people. Well, the statistics kind of bear out the fact that if you're playing that odds, it's not great odds that you're going to survive somebody pulling out a firearm. You have a 75% chance of not being killed, but you have a 50% chance of being shot and killed or injured. So
right.
it's that statistic is really clear.
Yeah, well, and let's be real too, that a big chunk of crimes where guns were used are in gang-related violence,
Of course.
right? And there's a piece here that addresses that as well. I'm trying to find that real quick. There's just so much to go through. I had it at one point, but it talked about. Yeah, here we go. So it broke down circumstances that led to people's deaths that were, as a result of these guns used in crimes. And it said 66.5% of these were gang related, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really surprising. 15.9% were drug related, 13.1% were a personal dispute. And so the reality is actually less than 5% of deaths from these guns used in these crimes were because of robbery and domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
So, so many of us probably have it in our minds that, well, I'm carrying my gun out in the public because there's this chance that I'm going to be robbed, and and I might get shot in that robbery. Well, it sounds, the truth of the matter is, statistically speaking, that's actually a pretty low probability. But that probability, but it certainly exists. Your probability of getting shot in a robbery, if you are able to avoid a robbery altogether, is basically zero. But we don't always have that choice. So, but if we quarantine all of ourselves because of coronavirus, those numbers will go way down as far as those robberies.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek with that.
right.
You sound like you were taking me a little too seriously.
No. I was gonna expand on that and say, it's the focus, right? Like when you look at 5% of the times people are actually robbed, right? That's the 5% of firearms being used to rob somebody. But 65, let's say 65, 75, 80, about 90% are either drug, gang, or some sort of personal dispute, right, where you may be caught in the collateral damage of this, right? Depending on where you live and things. But we're looking at an overwhelming majority of gun usage is societal problems, right? It's morality problems, gang related stuff, drug related stuff. And so when you're focusing on the gun aspect of it to stop potentially maybe the 5% that are just random a robbery, you're not gonna touch on any of the make an actual impact. And so I think this, to me, while I was reading it, I was saying, wow, this is total proof and total evidence that we need to shift the conversation from fighting about gun rights and things, because of course we have to fight for gun rights, but we have to switch the conversation back to, well, if you really want to end or diminish gun violence, let's look at where the most gun violence is perpetrated and direct those resources towards that. And that's gang related, drug related stuff. Let's not, move to decriminalize guns or drugs and decriminalize gang activity. Let's try to figure out what's causing that, and that will in turn,
Yep.
reduce gun crime. So that's always the argument, right? That's why they want to push more gun control, is to curb gun crime. Well,
Mm-hmm.
90% of it is right in front of you. You know what's causing it. So
Right. Yeah, and that's yeah. Well, we could get really deep with a lot of that. I do. We should move on to our other article here, and we want to make sure we have some time for our reviews.
for sure.
But I want to just touch on before we go, getting more specific on sources of where these criminals obtained their guns. So earlier, I think it was mentioned that less than 2%, but again, I think that number was pointing to all of these prisoners that were interviewed. Less than 2% obtained guns from a retail source. So of those that had guns and used them, in the commission of their crimes, that percentage is obviously going to be a little bit bigger. And so what it says here is that if we're looking at all prisoners, and it does break it down by state and by federal prisoners, but I'm just going to focus on the all prisoners numbers here. All right, so all prisoners purchased or traded a gun at a retail source, 10.1%. That was the source of their gun. 7.5% from a gun shop or store. Keep in mind, every gun shop runs background checks. So this tells you that the reason they are able to obtain that through a legal source, as far as this implies, I think, a gun shop is. I mean, gun shops don't stay in business very long when they sell guns illegally, right? When they don't follow ATF regulations. So this is a legal source of a gun, but this person is obviously obtaining it. Either they obtained it sometime before they committed the crime. Okay, so some of these could be first-time offenders, right? Some. That certainly is plausible. Chances are most of them are not. But it also could imply that there's a problem, that there's things that are able to slip through the cracks in the background check system. So when background checks are required, it's only as effective as the actual background check data, the information that's in the database that's checked against, right? 1.6% from pawn shops, 0.4% from flea markets, and 0.8% from gun shows. Keep in mind, this is from amongst all offenders that used a gun. Less than 1% at a gun show. And yet we hear so much talk about how we got to close these gun show loopholes. Sounds like there's a bigger problem with criminals obtaining guns at legal gun shops by far. Okay, this is a bigger one. Obtained from an individual, 25.3%, where 8% purchased or traded from a family or friend, 6.5% rented or borrowed from a family or friend, and 10.8% it was a gift or it was purchased for the prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
Which starts to sound a little bit like a straw purchase, right? Like they
Right.
may have said, "Well, it was a gift. They bought it for me." Well, now the definition according to the ATF, right, is if I decide to go and buy a gun, I pay the money for, say a Ruger LCP, and then I give it to Matthew. Of course, he lives out of state, and we're not related, but that might be a little bit of a problem. But Matthew, if you and I were best friends, or maybe we're brother and brother, we're brothers, right? Brother and brother. So I buy a gun and I give it to you as a gift, right? Well, it's a gift if I chose to buy that and I paid for it and then I gave it to you. If you gave me money to then buy it or you reimbursed me for that, then it's a straw purchase, right? Okay, all right. So I want to make sure that's clear for our listeners. And then 43.2% were from off the street, underground, black market, right? 6.4% were from thefts. 17.4% were from other sources, and it specifies these as found at location of crime or victim. So they used a gun in the commission of the crime, and they found the gun at the scene of the crime. So this could imply, and it says at location of crime / victim, this could imply that they break into your house, find your gun, and then shoot you with it. Okay. And then 4.6% brought by somebody else. So, and that's not that untypical, actually. A lot of these times these crimes are committed with 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals, and this dude here brings the gun, but this dude over here is the one that actually ends up using it.
All right.
So That's basically what that is. All right. So these are really, really, really interesting sources. A couple of problems with a lot of laws that are proposed with regards to universal background checks. Number one, it won't fix the problems with guns that are purchased legally, meaning from gun shops and stores or pawn shops where background checks are actually run. The 0.8% gun show, I wouldn't even worry about that. Even if yours is a state where private civilians can just be at the gun show and they meet, Joe and say, hey, I got this gun. You want to buy it? Yeah, okay. And then they just do a private party transfer. All right. In Colorado, you can't do that. You got to do background checks at gun shows. But the point is, their source is only 0.8%. I wouldn't even worry about that. It's such a small percentage. 25% is obtained from family and friends. I suspect a lot of these from family. And the problem with universal background check proposals is that they usually, at least all the ones I'm familiar with, have an exclusion for family members, which I think is completely reasonable. I mean, number one, I don't think universal background checks are reasonable at all. But if you're going to have it, then I think it's completely reasonable to allow family members to transfer guns amongst themselves. Right? Well, okay. Then you're not solving part of the problem. If your true intent with passing whatever laws to solve gun crime, there's a big problem then by having an exception for family and friends being able to transfer to the individual that commits the crime. Now, the reality is, even if you have a law like that in place, even if you don't have that exception, you're still going to have family and friends that are willing to give, Joe a gun to go commit a crime. I mean, they may not know he's going to go commit a crime with it, but you're still going to have that situation. You're still going to have that problem, right? And the black market sales. So basically what I'm saying here is you got 43%, 25%, 10%. You got like basically 70+% that these are problems that are really hard to address with current legislative proposals. Some of them are just flat out hard to address, period.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to recognize, to look at the data. This is government data. And, I think our legislators should look at this and be like, maybe we should rethink what we're doing here with some of our gun control proposals.
Right. Of course.
All right. I went too long with that, but guys, go check out this study. It's pretty interesting stuff. I like numbers, and it's got some good numbers. TheTrace.org. When protesters carry guns, does it impede others' free speech? Matthew, give us a rundown on this. Give us the breakdown.
Yeah, I put this in here because I like constitutional law and I like this kind of stuff. But basically, the argument here is it revolved around protesters, right, and their ability to peacefully protest. And they're saying, well, if protesters are carrying a firearm, does that inherently chill the speech or make other people that may protest want to counter protest? Does that chill their speech? Like, so for example, a couple groups that wanted to counter protest the gun rights bills or the gun legislation didn't show up because they said, well, we were scared because we had thousands and thousands of people carrying firearms. And so we weren't able to protest peacefully because we were scared. And so it brought up this debate and so there's some really good insightful comments in the article, which was, as you mentioned, from the Trace. You wouldn't expect a kind of a two-sided article here, but they do a good job of saying, look, if open carry is legal, then these people aren't doing anything illegal with their firearms, and they're peacefully assembling. If you are afraid of a firearm, well, that's not a universal thought, right? Like, not everybody who sees a firearm is scared of it, and therefore their speech would be chilled, right? So there's some nuance there because I think in Virginia they passed a law about militias and organizing militias and being able to do militia type activity in general public. And so they were sort of trying to meld these two ideas to say, we don't want these protests with armed people. even though there were zero incidents of people brandishing firearms or doing anything illegal with the firearm. They were
Mm-hmm.
totally legally carried and owned and everything. And so I think this is one of those things where the states are trying to institute these, and they're rightfully so. They can in certain areas, right? Like they can prohibit you from carrying a firearm into the courthouse or into a government building, of course. And so they're trying to basically expand that interpretation to say, well, maybe we can get it to say these paramilitary type activities in conjunction with a protest aren't necessarily peaceful. They're more paramilitary. And therefore, we're going to, if we have an event, we're going to ban people from being able to carry a firearm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's so I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of the episode, that this article is actually pretty good. It presents, I think, things pretty evenly. So it talks about, is there is there a constitutional case that can be made that would be able to prohibit guns from, just as a in a general sense, from being at protests or gatherings? And the article basically says, no, not really. And it actually references these the case, and I think we talked about this on the podcast a while back. When the university, or when Texas, the state of Texas,
Yes.
started allowing on-campus carry, there was quite an outcry by a few educators, a couple of colleges and universities making a big deal, and really probably just a few people at those colleges and universities making a big deal out of this. So there was a case that went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and where these professors lost. And their argument was that the presence of weapons in the class, potential, right? Again, they don't know because the students are carrying concealed, but that the presence of weapons in class would chill their First Amendment academic freedoms. But the court found they were choosing to self-censor their speech based on the hypothetical future decisions of students. Again, just because you have a gun does not mean, and far from it actually, that you actually are going to use it to hurt people. Okay, there's a section here. It says, "Do some scholars take exception to the current state of the law?" And it quotes Daryl Miller of Duke Law School, who argues in a paper. This is a doozy. "The presence of a gun in public has the effect of chilling or distorting the essential channels of a democracy." This is a really dumb argument, because if you look at the history of this nation and our so-called democracy and the founding of it, guns have always been a part of it. And so, if it didn't chill First Amendment freedoms in 1776, then why would it do so now? Now, I get that cultures and societies do change, but this is a fundamental human right, the right to defend oneself, the right to carry, to bear arms, and it's secured in our Second Amendment of our Constitution. Why should that change? And why suddenly does this chill the democracy, from being able to
Right.
function because people are able to carry guns or have guns? He says valueless opinions enjoy an inflated currency if accompanied by threats of violence. And again, when you look at these protests, and they label them as protests, let's say rallies. That sounds a little bit better. Protests, I suppose, is probably accurate. But so recently was the Virginia one where thousands of people showed up, and there were people there with guns. I didn't see or hear anybody threatening anybody, right? Like, just because you are carrying a gun, even openly, does not mean you're making threats of violence. Marianne Franks of the University of Miami, she argued, under the sway of the gun lobby, the Supreme Court has transformed the Second Amendment into a super right. Is the First Amendment a super right? Because it sure seems like it is. And it ought to be, by the way. She says that this chilling effect is felt most acutely by the least powerful members of society. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with that. Everybody has the right to possess and carry a gun. well, there's a few exceptions, right? I mean, currently under the law, felons, for instance, cannot, and so forth. But in a general sense, everybody has a right to carry a gun. So because you choose not to exercise that right, that somehow makes you less powerful, and now you are intimidated, you are chilled, you do not have, you cannot fully express your other freedoms because I choose to exercise that right. The
Right.
logic just does not add up. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's completely inconsistent. And what's crazy is at the same time they're making a statement against the firearms. They're making the exact argument why people need firearms. So she's saying just having a firearm, somebody having a firearm and somebody not, just that mere possession of a firearm gives that person the upper hand in speech. Well, maybe if you are scared, right? But think about your right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, your right to life. So if I know that criminals have firearms, right, I can make that same argument to say I'm a less powerful person in society because criminals now have the ability to have firearms and I don't. So I don't have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness because they're a criminal element out on the street. And just the mere presence of a firearm chilling speech is difficult to say when you have armed police officers at a rally or a protest. I could say, well, if you have police officers here with firearms, then I won't feel free to be able to hold up my sign because just the mere presence of a firearm, I don't know, the police officers are going to shoot me because they don't agree with my political stance. So I think these arguments they sound really nice in probably in a classroom on a college campus where everybody nods and, oh, yes, I agree. Guns are bad, NRA bad. But like when held to light or any sort of, opposite, hey, question of what do you really, let's talk about this, they fall apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about this? Consider this. What about situations where you have two groups at an event, two groups of protesters that maybe are on opposite sides? Maybe perhaps one group is bigger than the other, right? Because maybe one is there to sort of counter protest, right? So they're typically smaller, and the one group is shouting down the other group and is able to overwhelm the other group just by sheer noise and commotion. Well, I mean, is that not a case of First Amendment, free speech being used to chill the free speech of somebody else? See what I mean? You see what I'm getting at? So
Oh, absolutely.
how do we take the stance, and how do we enforce this? Because that, to me, that's what's implied here, is that there are those that would want to enforce some kind of law where if you're going to protest or assemble in public, that you can't do so with a firearm because just the mere presence of the firearm silences or chills the speech of others. It's a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
bull crap. I'm going to close with a statement here from the late Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, who was not a Second Amendment friend. And he wrote, "Your interest in keeping and bearing a certain firearm may diminish my interest in being and feeling safe from armed violence." Wow, if there wasn't a greater statement, snowflake like statement, I don't know what is. It just is remarkable to me that anyone could have served on the Supreme Court and have any understanding whatsoever of the Second Amendment. I mean, like, you're a Supreme Court justice, you know the Constitution, you should know it back and forth, every which way. And even if you don't fully believe or support in the individual right of possessing or carrying of a gun, I mean, just that statement alone right there is just remarkable to me, especially when you consider the history of our nation.
Yeah,
I'm frankly glad he's no longer on the court.
I second that.
All right. May he rest in peace. Just for the
Yes.
sake of not being too harsh. Anyway, speaking ill of the dead. All right. So, yeah, I'm sure there's probably more we could cover and go on to, but Matthew, it's time for gear reviews. And do you have a hard stop today? Are you Are you
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start with you. What is your gear review here today?
All right. So I just recently did an actual written article and video for this. It's called Reach by VeriSafety, and what it is a safe, and I use this word safe in the essence of it secures the firearm from being able to be, manipulated or shot. But what it is it's a minimalistic type safe that is almost like a holster that locks the gun into place, and it has, not an RFD, biometric thumbprint reader. And it's pretty slick. Initially I know that people are going to say, oh, well, I don't like the fact that you can take the magazine out while it's there. Or I don't like the fact that it's open and people could shim it and rip it apart and break it and all that. I think the point is that there are different solutions, environments, or different applications. And I think this is a great solution for if you have younger kids that aren't going to try to, shim it or have the strength to break it off of whatever you have it mounted to. If you need a safe that totally encapsulates it, great. But this safe, the biometrics on it are very up to date, like state of the art biometrics. And I found that I have a very high percentage of this thumbprint biometric reader working really well, even better than some of the older ones that I've tested out from different companies and stuff, and why I kind of stayed away from the biometric thing. And of course, it's electronic, so sure, something could happen, but it has a backup battery in it. It is connected to power, supposed to be connected to power. They have different handgun. I think they just listed out 180 gun models that are compatible, so you get a different holster shell type thing that locks in. But it's a really cool device, and I think that it'll get people who maybe didn't use a safe before or some sort of security device before, and they were just putting it in their drawer or something like that, to actually start using something that secures the firearm, at least from somebody who, not motivated to steal the gun per se, but maybe just accidentally shoot the gun, like a kid or a neighbor or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool to see, these new up and coming products, particularly safety related ones. Safety is always something that's at the forefront of my mind, because I got 5 kids that, their safety is of the utmost importance to me. I have a method of how I maintain that safety. How I ensure that particularly my youngest children don't gain access to firearms, because that is a concern of mine. I have a almost 2-year-old now who he finds his older brother's toy gun. And the first thing he does, and he sees his older brother, playing with it. And mostly my oldest son is just, whether it's a Nerf gun or he's got an airsoft gun, mostly he's just shooting cardboard targets or something to that effect. But the little one sees that, picks up the gun, knows that he points it, and starts waving it around and pointing at everybody. And then, he tries to work the trigger, but he's not really strong enough yet. So what does he do? I watch this happen, and I put a stop to it naturally, because I don't want to be reinforcing these sorts of things, but he struggles to get the trigger to go right, and so I'm just sitting on the couch and I'm watching him. Kind of, for me, it was more like watching my youngest son to see how he would handle that gun and what he would do with it naturally. Right, he's a little too young for me to be able to really educate well on the finer points of gun safety. Right. And so, other than UC gun, don't touch gun, right? That's about what he understands right now, because he understands don't touch stove, don't touch, other things in the house that we don't want him to touch. But so I'm just watching him, just kind of somewhat amused and observing how he was handling that, and he was struggling with the trigger, and he flips it around. He looks straight down the muzzle and puts his 2 thumbs on it and pushes it down. And which, I mean, and I was like, you hear so many of these little kids that gain access to their parents or grandparents or somebody else's gun in a home. And so many times I think those wounds are probably head wounds. I think that's naturally what a little one tends to do is they flip it around so they can get a little more leverage, put the thumbs on the trigger, push the trigger down, and to do that, it's almost inevitably pointing at your head, your face, right? And that's the scary thing with that kind of stuff when especially the little ones gain unauthorized access to a firearm. So I commend Vera Safety with their product. I think it looks like a pretty decent one. I saw your review and I thought it was pretty good. There's other products out there that are trying similar things, but I don't feel like they excel quite so well as I think this one is. So that's pretty cool. My review today. My review is going to be on the P320, so obviously 6-hour, P320 X5 Legion.
That's cool.
I've had it for a few months now. And so here it is. All right. Those of you that are able to view on Facebook and YouTube, if you are listening to the audio only, well, maybe head on over to the YouTube channel or Facebook page if you want to actually see it in person. Or you may already know what it looks like. Now, so everyone knows I do have a barrel block in this, okay, for just safe handling purposes as I am doing so here on camera. And so P320 X5 Legion, I have the original X5 and shot it in competition, mostly 3-gun for the last couple of seasons. And I've been very pleased, very happy with the 320 X5. I think it's a fantastic firearm. Last year, Sig Sauer blew me out of the water. Like I did not see it coming at all. The Legion, right? Because I already thought the X5 was pretty good, but they came out with this TXG grip module, tungsten infused grip module. This thing is like witch doctor level, of innovation. I mean, who would have thought? Obviously somebody did, and I know Phil Strader was very integral to this whole idea. But who would have? I mean, so all right. Here's the thing: you got steel framed guns, out there, or aluminum framed, but like 1911s, CZs, stuff of that nature, right? They weigh a little bit more. So that weight's going to help a little bit on controllability and tamping down that recoil some, right? Then you have polymer framed guns, which are lighter weight, so they might be a little bit more jumpy, but also polymer has some added benefits that it actually, if you watch polymer framed guns being fired under like super slow-mo, you'll see that whole polymer frame like flexing and moving, and it's a little bit weird and a little bit scary actually. The first time you see it, you're like, my gun is doing that every time it shoots? Yeah, it is. But the polymer is designed in such a way, and of course we have an internal frame, so the gun's not going to blow apart, but it's kind of freaky. But the reality is polymer does actually do some work in terms of mitigating some of that recoil. There's some absorption that occurs in the material itself. Well, the downside again is polymer is a lot lighter weight. So you take tungsten and infuse it into a polymer mixture, stick that in a mold and cast it, and you end up with this. This gun weighs like 43.5 ounces. Basically, the max allowable weight they just changed it, by the way, with the new 2020 USPSA rules. But under the old rules, this was basically the maximum the gun could weigh for production or carry optics gun. It is hefty. Okay, so now is this something I would want to carry as a carry gun? Not necessarily, but for a competition gun, heck yeah, man. And I've been shooting this, and I've kind of taken a step back from 3-gun matches. I've been shooting more USPSA. I just shot a match last week. Actually, the first match I shot, I think, was with this gun as well, and took first place. And the match I shot last week, I took second place. Now I still think I would have finished pretty well, but I'll tell you, shooting this thing is a dream. If you look at footage of me shooting it, this is the recoil motion right here. It's like where normal recoil might be like, I don't know, 10% or 10 degrees or something. It's like 3. It's ridiculously flat shooting. You do see the one I have here is without the magwell, so it does come with an integrated magwell. I have to remove it for carry optics rules, but with the magwell is awesome as well. I'm running the Romeo 1 red dot on this. I do not actually have the Romeo 1 Pro, so the Legion comes set up for a Romeo 1 Pro footprint. So this is the truth is actually this is my original X5 slide with my original Romeo 1 that I've just swapped out the slide and put it on the Legion grip module. The trigger's a little bit different than what comes with the Legion. This is that's because this is a Gray Guns trigger right here. So I upgraded the trigger to a Gray Guns one. Makes it really, really nice. About 3.5 pounds for striker fired. It's pretty dang good. Interestingly enough, Matthew, the tungsten infused polymer, it changes the grippiness of the material in some weird way. Because like if you look at the actual texture of the stippling, right, it looks identical to the same stippling on the original grip modules, but it's grippier. So there's something about the way, like, I say this because on the original one, I added some grip tape to give me a little bit more bite. I don't feel like I have to do that with this one.
Wow.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll just say I've got thousands of rounds for this gun so far. I put 2,000 of it just in one weekend. I shot this all weekend long with Mike Steeklander and Rob Latham in their bigger circle course that I participated in November, and it performed admirably. There was one drill they had us shoot. It was a fade back drill where we started at 5 yards, I think it was, and we just kept working our way back to 25 yards. And I think it was, I can't remember how many shots, like 20 some odd shots. And I was the only one that shot, I believe I shot a perfect score, or I kept everything, or maybe I was the only one that kept everything in the black. No, I think I was the only one that shot, I think I shot a perfect score. There was guys there with high-end 2011s, and stuff, and guns that are way more expensive, way fancier than this. This thing flat out shoots. It is a great gun. So there you go. I probably spent enough time on it as it is. But guys, particularly if you're looking to get into competition shooting, I strongly encourage you. I recommend looking into the 320 X5 Legion. I'm pretty dang confident you're going to love and enjoy it. If you're looking for a holster to pair with it, I've got the LAG Tactical Supernova holster. This is they're actually a sponsor of mine, just in full disclosure. LAG Tactical sponsors me for my competition gear, my mag pouches, my holsters, and this is actually a little bit upgraded version or model from the original Supernova that I had. It's great. It's a great holster. I got it mounted here with a Safariland QLS. I can take it on and off really quickly on the drop holster mount, whatever thing. So yeah, there you go. LAG Tactical Supernova holster, P320 X5 Legion. Love it. I will be shooting a lot more this year with this gun and with this very setup right here.
Very cool, man. I was excited to hear what you. I know you talked about it a couple times, but didn't get really in depth, and that's really neat.
Yeah, probably 4,000, 5,000 rounds, somewhere around there that I've put through it now up to this point. Speaking of which, I have been kind of quiet about this. I actually shot it through a winter postal match, and I kind of failed the last week of that match. It was something put on by BJ Norris. My Gun Tips is a website that he has, and he did the My Gun Tips postal match back in like December and January. And I participated, and I shot this the whole way through that, and also did very well. I think I finished third place. Nationwide, not a ton of shooters were participating, but there was, some legit like grandmaster level shooters. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. Great gun.
Good job, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yep. That's my report. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, all right. That brings us to the end of the episode here.
Yeah.
Crazy. The time has flown by.
Yes.
It's been so much fun, Oh, sorry. Quick question from Minuteman for Jesus on YouTube. Yes, it is a 9mm, sir. It is a 9mm. The X5 P320 only comes right now 9mm. There's been rumor that a 40 would come at some point. Don't know, how true or substantiated that is, but it is a 9mm. I think there's somebody out there playing with the idea, or maybe they're actually even selling 40 caliber barrels for them now, but I don't know for sure on that. But right now, I would just count on 9. And that actually makes sense because if you're shooting carry optics or production, your minor power factor anyway. So there's really no point in shooting anything bigger. It's not going to get you more points because the division itself is limited to minor power factor points. So you might as well just shoot a 9 like everybody else would be. So again, I understand that not everybody would buy one of these just for competition use, but from a competition perspective. Anyway, so, well, guys. Oh, wait. Giveaway.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I was waiting. I got it all pulled up and everything.
Oh, well, carry away with it, good sir. So we're gonna pick a winner of what? An SSP Eyewear gift card, $50 gift card.
$50 gift card.
Sweet.
Yes.
So who's it gonna be? I'm gonna do the drum roll then.
All
You're
right.
gonna be the announcer. Here we
I'm
go.
ready to go. All right, the winner of the SSP Eyewear $50 gift card is first name Tony, last name starts with an L, and you have a Gmail email address that's TO, and then has a couple numbers in it.
Tony L.
Yeah.
Tony
L. Congratulations, man.
Lambrea?
Almost, but not. It's close.
Because we know a Tony Lambrea.
Yes, that is, but it's close. But
that would be hilarious if he signed up for our giveaway. And I guess, technically he could qualify. So, yeah. All right. Congrats, Tony L., whoever you are. You are going to get you're going to get a coupon code or a voucher code, $50 SSP Eyewear. That's what I wear. That's what I was using in my last competition shooting. Is actually the what's the name of those eyeglasses? I think you have a set too, Matthew.
The Methow ones or the
yes, Methow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The full wrap around and single lens.
Mm-hmm.
You can swap them out. With clear and yellow and kind of like a pink, and brown and all these different colors.
I love those.
Yeah, it's really, really, really cool. I think you can not quite buy a Methow kit with $50, but it would get you well on your way, and I'd highly recommend it.
Yep.
Heck yeah, man.
Next week, giveaway will be a 511 hat, Flight 93 commemorative 511 ball cap.
Nice.
Yes.
Awesome. So, guys, make sure you're signing up for the weekly giveaway at concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. All right. And so, with that, it is time to let you go, and we bid you all farewell. But before we do, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care. Boom. We are done with the recorded portion of the show. Cool. Thanks all for being here. Let's see. A couple of questions that I will address quickly. Well, really the one question I see. Riley, where do you buy your parts for customizing holsters? Where do I buy parts? I buy parts from holstersmith.com. That is the go-to place, in my opinion. They've got pretty much everything. So whether it's screws you need or posts or, I don't know that they have Safariland QLS type stuff, but they've got other things. Yeah. Plus, you can buy molds. You can buy all kinds of things, and you can buy everything you need to get started, even building holsters if you so care. So yeah, holstersmith.com. That's where I buy my stuff. You can usually find what you need right there on their site.
Cool.
And let's see, was it just me or was Matthew trying not to smile a minute ago? Matthew's always trying not to smile. It's that tough, Marine persona.
Yeah, I'm a tough guy.
I think that was in response to the comment that apparently I was muzzling the photo of you. Jared, I guess that was a comment to Jared or something about, you have a photo of him on your desk. Why do you have a photo of Jared or whoever it was? And then Jared says, is that the one in the Speedo? That is pretty funny. That's good stuff, guys. Well, we'll let you go. Take care, and we'll be back here Thursday for more of the Concealed Carry podcast. Thanks for watching.